We'll go ahead and do our meditation first. before we get started, please join me in invoking our teacher's name 3 times. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Alrighty, so we are continuing our study of the Four Noble Truths, the Bible of Buddhism, if we had one. So last week we covered the first noble truth, which is suffering. Life is suffering, or life is dissatisfactory. Or we really should be saying that in life there is suffering, right? Because life is both good and bad. So life itself is not suffering, but there's suffering within our lives. And so that we covered that. Could you please make your words? Thank you. And I use them as an example in a minute. So life is suffering. So we covered last week that we all suffer in some way, shape, or form. It could be physical, it's mental, emotional, even spiritual at times. And then that the goal of seeing that is recognizing suffering within our life, is recognizing that when certain emotions rise within us or when certain situations happen, we can need to recognize that this is suffering. And so when we're able to recognize that this is suffering, it'll hopefully, what we should be doing is able to kind of pause and reflect on what's going on, and so that we can react correctly, right? We can correctly respond to the situation or to the emotion. So if we feel anger arising, it's like, sure, we're angry. We may be angry at the person. Maybe someone's yelling at us. Maybe someone's trying to attack us. Maybe whatever is happening, right? And so we get angry, but the suffering is not the anger itself. The suffering is what is causing that anger, which brings us to the second noble truth, is the origin of suffering. Where does suffering actually come from? Why do we suffer? So the Buddha taught us that suffering is because of our desire, because of our desires. More specifically, the attachment that we have towards those desires. And the desire, there are different teachings about the second noble truth, but the most prominent is that there are 3 different types of desires. There's sensual pleasure desires, right, from our body, physical body and senses. There's a desire to become, and there's a desire to get rid of, to let go, or to get rid of, sorry. So sensual desire is obvious, right? It's physical desires, it's all our senses, right? So we want physical pleasure, we want emotional pleasure, we want pleasure from food, from our senses, right? We want to hear good things. We want to listen hear pleasant sounds and noises and music, whatever it is. We want to taste good food. We want to see beautiful things, right? Those are desires that from the senses. And so when we are eating, for example, right? If we're eating something that we like, right? What we typically do is eat more of it, right? It's like, oh, this is good. I want more. And can tend to happen from that is we eat too much and then we're gaining weight. We become obese or become diabetic or whatever other malady comes from it, right? So when we're eating, for example, and we're eating something we like, we need to at least be aware that eating something we like is a desire. We have to eat, obviously, to survive, but we need to eat in moderation, right? So that's why the doctor always recommends, proper diet and exercise, etc. Because there's moderation in diet, there's moderation in exercise. And so if you do too much or too little, then there's going to be an imbalance. So when we're eating desserts, we're eating something we like, we just need to be aware that, hey, I'm eating something I like. And I also need to be aware that I need to eat it in moderation. Otherwise, your body's going to go into overload or whatever, right? And then the desire to become, which is something we all have, right? We desire to become happy, we desire to become successful, wealthy, we desire to get married, have kids and children and career. We have desires to become monks or nuns, right? We have all these desires, right? We have a desire to become something. And which is also not bad to an extent, right? We desire to become something because we are unhappy with what we currently have, right? We are unhappy with what things already are. So we have a desire to change it. But what comes from that desire of wanting is also the desire to get rid of. So in order to be happy, I have to get rid of this, right? In order to be successful, I have to screw all these people over, or whatever it may be, right? You have there's a give and a take in a way, which doesn't always benefit us, right? So, we spiritually we come to temple or to church, right? We desire to get rid of the bad things that we have and gain some good stuff, right? And so sometimes we don't realize what the problem is here is we don't realize that the problem of wanting and getting rid of is not external, right? So we're thinking, I'm not successful because I have so much competition at work, which is true, right? Or I'm not happy because this is how it is out there. I'm not happy because my family's driving me crazy. I'm not happy because school is too hard. I'm not happy because my work doesn't pay me enough, right? So we're blaming external things for our own unhappiness, which may have some effect, but truly, in order to kind of get rid of those desires, to get rid of those external blaming, we have to really see things as they truly are and accept them as they are, right? And that if we want change, change has to come within. So when we try to do some introspection of things, right? So part of the second noble truth is, yeah, there's a desire there, but what is that desire? What is it truly that I'm after here, right? We can say, yeah, I want a good job, but it's more than that, right? It's usually, I want a good job so I can have lots of money, so I can buy a new, bigger house, fancier car, travel, etc., right? So one desire of having a good job extends to 5 other desires, right? And those other desires spread out to even more desires because we're accumulating more stuff. So we have this assumption that more money or a better job or a bigger house, etc., is going to bring us happiness, right? And what we talked about last week is for the first noble truth is, sure, we can have all these things, but what happens when something happens to it, right? What happens when our house burns down or our car gets totaled or someone passes away or we lose something or break something? What happens then, right? Our happiness from that thing that caused us happiness is now causing us suffering because it's gone or it's broken or it's burnt down or it's dead, whatever it may be. So the suffering here is not that it broke down or whatever, right? Just because it went away, that's not the suffering. Our suffering is the attachment to that thing, to that item, to that person. And because something happened to it, because there was change, right, we are suffering. Because we don't want to, we're not applying the teaching and the application, the practice of impermanence, right? Everything's impermanent. Buildings can last for hundreds of years, but eventually it's going to rot, right? Things are going to break. There's going to be cracks in the walls, cracks in the ceiling, foundation breaks apart, whatever it may be, right? So things change, but we don't want that change. We want to hang on to these things and pretend like they're impermanent and will last forever, right? Because we hang on to them, because we cling to that notion that things are forever, that when they do change and we realize that they're not forever, then we suffer, right? We get disappointed, we get sad, we get depressed, whatever happens. I'm trying to find my quote here. I have a quote from that. Here it is, from Lama Thupten Yishi. He quotes, "Take some time to reflect on each of the Four Noble Truths, one at a time, and see how they relate to your own life. Try to come up with examples where you've recognized suffering, where you recognize a suffering situation, determined its cause, concluded it did not have to be that way, and remediated the situation. Finally, make a determination to apply this knowledge to suffering whenever you encounter it." So the Four Noble Truths, as we go through them, we will hopefully come to the realization that they are a type of formula that we should apply to things. And so the formula here is that there is suffering, right? We're angry. I'm angry at my parents, whatever, as an example. I'm angry at my parents, right? That's the first noble truth. The second noble truth is the origin of that suffering. Why are you angry? Maybe they took your electronics away or something, whatever, right? And then once you're at the second noble truth, they took my electronics away, then you have to dig deeper. That's not the cause. The cause is something else. You did something to make them take your electronics away, right? And so we have to reflect what that core root is, what that core situation is. Be able to reflect on what you may have done incorrectly or wrong or whatever, right, that had caused the parents to take away those electronics. The third noble truth is it's gone now, but there's a way to get it back, right? The fourth noble truth is the way to get it back, the Eightfold Path, which is going to take us a couple of months to go through, but that is the formula, right? So there's suffering, there's a reason why you're suffering, there is a way out of suffering, this is the way out of that suffering. That's the formula. And so as we learn and go through the Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, because remember that our practice here is not passive, right? We cannot just read and listen to Dharma talks or whatever, right? We actually have to apply it to our life. If you want change, if you want true peace, if you want true freedom, because what is suffering? Suffering is the absence of freedom. It's the absence of peace. So in order to get that peace, in order to get that freedom, right, we actually have to apply these noble truths and the Eightfold Path to our life. It'll be as if we went to medical school for how many years, right? We spent all this money, we spent all this time studying, we spent, hours and hours and hours of trying to get this degree, and then after we got our degree, we became a banker, right? So you put in all the work, you put in all the effort, but then you're doing nothing with it, right? So we can't do that with our practice either. We can't just read, we can't just listen and think we're doing something. You actually have to apply it, you actually have to do it in order for it to actually be effective. And then something else I kind of touched on last week, where I think we left on actually, was about our ego, our self, right? Our identity. Our ego is we're basically puppets, and our ego is our master, right? Our ego is what kind of really controls the way we see things, how we react to things, how we think things should be. Because of all the desires, one thing that we all have in common is the desire of expectations, right? So you may not be suffering from the desire of sense pleasures or getting rid of or becoming, but you do have a desire of expectation. And this expectation is rooted from our ego, right? Because our ego, our mindset, our identity expects people to be certain, to act in a certain way, to say certain things. We expect situations to be a certain way. right? And so when reality kind of hits us in the face and those expectations don't meet up to what we wanted them to be, then we suffer, right? So our ego kind of manipulates things in a way, manipulates our life in a way. So part of our practice is to watch our thinking mind. We have to watch how we think about certain things, about certain situations with certain people. We have to see how our mentality, how our ideas develop as they're happening, right? It's difficult to kind of watch our thinking mind if we're in a difficult situation or a heated argument, right? It's difficult to kind of be able to sit back and see how our thinking is running, but it is an important practice because then we can see the trends of how our thinking works, why we react to certain things in a certain way, why do we say certain things to certain people or to certain situations. And when we're able to see those trends, right, we can essentially make a graph of our thinking and be like, this is the way I'm thinking because of this. I'm thinking like this because of that, right? We see all the roots of the causes of our suffering. And once we're able to see that in the big picture, we can work toward eliminating some of those roots, some of those weeds that we have to pluck out, right? Some of those bad weeds. Sometimes it may just be a certain, sometimes it can be people that we kind of have to either back off from being around or, unfriending them altogether. Or it could be, a situation at work or a situation in life, school, whatever it may be, right? We really have to find the cause and work either to get rid of it if we can, or work on accepting how it is, because it's not going to change, right? This usually happens when we're facing a difficult coworker or, a student in one of our classes, right? There's really no way to get away from them unless we move or go to a different class or a different job, right? So in those situations, we really can't do anything about it. But what we can do is just accept that this is how it is, right? And there's no reason to linger over malicious thoughts that we have against them, right? Keying their car or cutting their computer plug or something, which I've never done, by the way. So we have to, since we can't change the situation, we can't throw the person out the window, right? We have to accept how the situation is. We have to accept the reality of how it is and just be able to move on. It's easier said than done, obviously, right? Because sometimes people will just bring really huge negative emotions out of us, right? Where we're just maliciously cutting them to pieces in our mind. But that benefits no one, and most certainly does not benefit you, because all that's going to do is cause you to think of even worse ways to cut them into pieces, right? And next time I see you, you're on CNN News in jail for murdering a person, cutting them up in 3,000 different pieces. But we really have to watch how our thinking happens, how our thinking works, how our thinking goes through the situations, because of our expectation of things, right? Because we expect ourselves to be a certain way when we grow up, right? We expect ourselves to live a certain lifestyle or be a certain type of person. We expect to make this much money or have this many kids. We expect people to have our same opinions and views that we do, right? And so when it doesn't happen, when you're arguing about a person about views or opinions, then you only create an argument, right? You're not doing anything positive. So we really have to also let go of those expectations. And we have expectations all the time, right? We don't really realize it until something happens that contradicts that expectation, right? Oh, you weren't supposed to do that. You're not supposed to be doing that. Or you're not supposed to be saying that. Whatever it may be, right? So when we're able to watch our thinking mind and realize that our expectations are essentially false views of the world, right? because that's not how they truly are. That's just how we want them to be. And so when we're able to accept that, and accept that if we did have an expectation of something or someone and it doesn't happen, that we can just let it go, versus wishing it was a different way, wishing something different happened, or somebody said something differently, right? Because all we're doing is just lingering over the ifs and what ifs and buts and blah blah blah, right? Like the birds. I forgot about the birds. We have an expectation in the dogs at this point. We have an expectation when we come to a temple to meditate. It's quiet. It should be quiet. We're in solitude. We're in a different realm of consciousness. But then you have the birds yapping, right? The dogs barking. And you're like, I'm supposed to be meditating in peace. Those birds should not be yapping. Those dogs should not be barking, right? We're making excuses for the expectations that we should be having when we come to a temple, right? We expect the temple to be quiet, expect the temple to be peaceful, right? Well, all I was thinking about when the birds were yapping was, I'm gonna barbecue if you don't stop yapping, right? But when we realize these expectations are just false realities that we've created, then we can kind of get over it and face true reality, that the yapping is still going to be there unless we remove them, right? The dogs are still going to bark until the dog that's walking outside goes away. So when we're able to accept those facts, those true, how reality truly is, then it'll hopefully bring you some peace. It may not be what you wanted it to be. It may not come out the way you wanted it to come out. But at least we've accepted that that's just how it is, which we never want to do, right? Because all we want to do is when something doesn't happen our way or go our way, we want to do everything we can to change it, to make it go our way, right? So we're forcing more stuff on top of something that's already broken or something that's already changed. I don't know. Practice what I preach, right? Yeah, so as these expectations of the dogs not stopping barking hits us, right, in this moment, as soon as we come to that realization, as soon as we come to that insight of my expectation is broken, or this is not how I want it to be, or this is how I, wish it were to become, as soon as we come to that realization, we've come to a moment of enlightenment because we've realized that this is how it is, and we've hopefully accepted the cause of the situation that we're in, and are able to kind of move on. Otherwise, all we're doing is just arguing, wishing that things were different. But we really just need to accept the change, or accept the reality of how it is, and be able to kind of move on. Another quote. There it is. Okay. So that when we are feeling depressed or negative, just in that moment, when we refuse to indulge in that feeling, is an enlightened experience. Our most basic and deep-seated craving is wanting things to be different than what they are. Desire is the fuel that keeps the wheel of samsara turning. We must take the fuel away to stop the engine of the wheel. Remember, samsara is the world that we live in. It's the cyclic existence of existence, right? In samsara, we have the 6 realms that we covered a while back ago. And so samsara is just our perpetual, repeated life cycles as we come in, right? And we're stuck in samsara until we're able to escape that suffering of samsara and attain enlightenment. Okay. I'm not going to go through the Third Noble Truth until next week. I'm going to continue talking. So, anyway. So, the point is today of this formula of the Four Noble Truth is to look at the suffering that you're in, right? Whether you're in arguments, whether you are angry about something or someone, or you're in a situation where things aren't the way you want them to be, take that opportunity to reflect what's going on. Reflect why you feel that way. Reflect why you think that should be the way that is, right? Because my view and your view may be different, right? We're arguing about our views and our opinions. And this argument just goes back and forth, sometimes with no resolution. Neither of us could be right, neither of us can be wrong, right? It is what it is, it just is. And so when we're able to accept that this is my view and it's not going to change, or that's your view and it's not going to change, then we're able to hopefully just sit back and okay, right? Every time I used to argue with someone and they weren't listening, I'm just okay, cool, you're right, and just walk away with, just rolling my eyes. But that's really all you can do, especially nowadays, right? People are arguing politically, and some people are just so strong on their views and their opinions that not even the facts are able to change those views and opinions. But it doesn't matter, right? Your job isn't to try to change their mind. Your job isn't to try to get them to see your way or your view or your opinion. Because your opinion, to you, it's correct, right? You think it's right, but it could be wrong. So you could be convincing this person from their own views to even a more wrong view, right? Or maybe the right view, it doesn't matter. But we are attached and we get angry in those situations because we have this ego that's saying, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm better than you, I'm more perfect, I'm more educated, I'm more wealthy, I'm, right? Whenever we have opinions and these views, right, if you really reflect on them, you're gonna see a lot of me and I's, right? There's a disconnect between me and them, right? I'm right, they're wrong. I'm better and they're worse. I'm rich, they're poor, right? There's this comparison. And so once we're able to kind of reflect and really look into our thinking, it's always going to go back to looking into our thinking and being able to recognize that, this is my ego trying to defend itself, right? Because we're thinking, I think I'm right and you're wrong. And so when we're arguing about this opinion, about this thought process or viewpoint, right? We're getting angry and we're retaliating, we're arguing back because our ego is trying to defend itself. Because our ego is like, no, you're so wrong and I'm so right. And you need to see that I'm right? And so we continue to argue until maybe something happens, maybe something doesn't happen. Either way, you're defeated. Either way, you're wrong and they're wrong. Maybe you're right and they're right. It doesn't matter, right? It shouldn't matter to try to change anyone's opinion or viewpoint. It shouldn't matter to try to change their lifestyle or their way of thinking. What matters is if you have these thoughts of wanting to make the change or making them see your viewpoint, then you're already wrong. Whether you're right or wrong, you're already wrong. You're in the wrong mindset. You're in the wrong place. You're not there to change people. You're there to accept reality as it is. You're there to understand situations, viewpoints, opinions, right, lifestyles, and whatever. But the moment you try to argue back. The moment you start comparing, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm better, you're worse, etc., then you're already stuck in that ego. Your ego's already taken hold. Your ego's playing puppeteer, puppet master, right? And we have to work on severing those strings, or puppet strings. And by doing that, you work through the formula of the formidable truths. So I'll stop there. Hopefully whatever I said makes sense, because I talk to myself a lot, so in my head it makes sense. And so next week we'll cover the third noble truth, and the fourth noble truth the week after that, and then maybe we'll have to do a whole session on how to meditate on the Four Noble Truths before we hit to the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is a pretty heavy topic. But we'll see how things goes. I'm not going to worry. So anyway, any questions, concerns, emotional outbursts I don't want to hear?
Thank you for your talk today, Master.
Thank you for listening.
I got my mind going there. So I'm thinking about the dog barking, right? That's a great one, because that's just something we deal with here all the time. And while it's an annoyance, my ego says that's an annoyance. How do they dare annoy me? Mm-hmm. But I started thinking about sensory input. So how does that annoyance get in my brain in the first place? And I thought about the fact that when the dogs bark, all they're doing is creating sound waves. Pure and simple. It's the same sound as touching, or ringing the bell. It's just a sound. That sound's coming to my eardrum. It's vibrating. Then it goes to my thalamus. That's an organ in your brain. Mm-hmm. Your thalamus is where your mind intercepts that vibration and says, well, what kind of vibration is it? Oh, it's a dog. Is the dog hungry? What's the dog barking at? So by the time I get about 5 or 10 questions into that, I've been away from my cushion for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. So to your point, when we say the ego, the mind is what creates all these stories. And if there's no story, the mind wants to make one, because that's its job, is to create interesting stories for you. And I think, what I hear you saying is that we have to just let that story die away, because the story is not real. Our reality is what's real. Right. And we're never going to stop our minds from creating stories. But to your point, we learned how to sense when we're going from a vibration hitting our eardrum to our brain spinning a long story about, it starts off with a dog barking, and pretty soon it's like, my dog never barked. Oh, I used to love that dog. We used to go to the park. And so it's just thought after thought. It just wants to just keep spinning this story until we just finally consciously, once we bring our awareness to it, we can stop that story. But if we're caught up in it, that's the puppet master thing, right?
Right. That's all part of our meditation, right? So when we went over meditation, when we covered how to handle distracting thoughts, right? It's kind of the same process. Is you hear the sound, right? You hear the dog barking, which is okay, right? Let it bark. But then what happens when we create that story? Why are they barking? Who are they barking at? Are they hungry? Are they hurt? Are they whatever, right? But really what we should just be saying is sound.
Sound.
Just acknowledging the sound. Because whether it's a dog barking, the birds yapping, the door opens, the bell rings, it's all sound.
It's vibrations, right? Hitting your eardrum.
Right. It's just the sound. It's not a door, it's not a bell, it's not a dog, it's not a bird. What all I have that in common is sound. So that's what we need to recognize as it's sound, right? Or smell. We smell something, or taste, whatever it may be, right? We don't give stories to the sounds, to the senses, to whatever's happening, right? Because when we get stories, then we go on to limbo land, and our whole meditation is gone, right? Yes, because our mind, and I mentioned this before, our mind is addicted to time. It's addicted to the past. It's addicted to the present. Addicted to the past and addicted to the future. So when we hear the dogs and we want to create this story, we're already thinking of the past. Why are they barking? Because something happened. Somebody walked by, right? It's already barking. Or maybe we're thinking of the future. Oh, maybe they're hungry. Maybe you have to go give them more food or give them water, right? Our mind does that and creates all these stories because it's afraid to be in the present. Because the present moment is the only true moment, right? We can only live in the now. We can't live in the past. It's already happened, and we're not psychic, so we can't live in the future. We can only live now. And so when we hear these sounds, right, and eventually you'll be able to tune it out, right? 10 minutes is not enough for me to be able to tune it out. It takes 10 minutes for me just to get into the mindset of meditation, right? But 30, 40, 60 minutes in, if you're doing meditation correctly, then you don't even acknowledge the sound. The sound's not there. You're already in a hopefully higher state of mind where people can be knocking on the door and it doesn't faze you. So hopefully when we have our next meditation retreat, we have longer sessions of meditation. You can get glimpses of that experience. But yes, acknowledging these labels could be for anything, right? In any situation, you have to be meditating. Because even when we're driving a car and we're seeing someone speed up, right, and cut us off or whatever, we get angry, we yell at them, we curse at them, we flip them off, we do all these other things, right? We're making excuses as to why they're speeding, but they have their own story for speeding, maybe, right? Or maybe they're just bad drivers. I don't know. That's not the point. The point is, it happens. Speed, cut off, whatever you want to label it, and just let it go. Because what else are you gonna do? Get so upset that you're gonna speed after them and cut them off too, and cause a million accidents? Maybe someone gets hurt. Maybe someone dies. What was the point? Is there any benefit to that? No. There's no benefit. There's no benefit of getting angry. There's no benefit of fighting anger with anger. You're just going to cause more anger, right? You can't put up fire with more fire. You just create a bigger fire. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Well, we'll go ahead and transfer the merit and go into chanting. Namo Shakyamuni Shakyamuni Buddha Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. For any positive karmic action we've accumulated here today, we wish to transfer the merit to all sentient beings and wish them full enlightenment. Let's get to general chanting.
Speech and mind in perfect oneness, lies in my heart, along with the sound of the bell. May the hearers awaken from forgetfulness and transcend all anxiety and sorrow. Listen, listen, this wonderful sound brings me back to my true home. In gratitude we offer this incense to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas throughout space and time. May it be fragrant as earth herself, reflecting our careful effort, our wholehearted mindfulness, and the fruit of understanding. Slowly ripening, may we and all beings be companions of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. May we awaken from forgetfulness and realize our true home. The censer now is burning all the Dharma realm in every place. Auspicious clouds appearing and sincere intention thus fulfilling. As all Buddhas now show their perfect body, homage to thy incense cloud canopy, Bodhisattva and great Bodhisattvas. Homage to the eternally abiding Buddha, the supreme Dharma, and sagely Shanga. Throughout the empty realm of empty space and 3 periods of time. Homage to the fundamental teacher Shakyamuni Buddha, Maitreya, honored future Buddha, universal great conduct Bodhisattva, all Dharma guarding Deva Bodhisattvas, and the magic mountain assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Homage to Amitabha Buddha in the land of ultimate bliss. Avalokiteshvara, great compassion Bodhisattva, urging Bodhisattva, restore great vow Bodhisattva, and the assembly of great pure sea like Bodhisattva. Namo Arya Avalokiteshvaraya Bodhisattvaya Mahasattvaya Mahakarunikaya Om Sudahatasya Namaskritva Namanarya Avalokiteshvaraya Namo Nilakanta Sri Mahapatashami Sarvadata Shubham Ashiyam Sarvasattva Namo Tassava Namo Bhagavate Vindu Tadyata Om Avalokaloka Kalati Ishiri Mahabodhisattva Sabo Sabo Mara Mara Mashi Mashi Ridayu Guru Guru Gamin Duru Shakyamunaye Buddhaya. Namo Shakyamunaye Buddhaya. The one who bows and the one who is bound to are both by nature empty. Therefore, the communication between them is inexpressibly perfect. Our practice center is the metta Indra, reflecting all Buddhas everywhere as my own person reflects in all Buddhas, to whom with my whole life I go for refuge. Offering light in the 10 directions, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, to whom we bow in gratitude. Teaching and living the way of awareness in the very midst of suffering and confusion. Shakyamuni Buddha, the awakened one, to whom we bow in gratitude. Cutting through ignorance, awakening our hearts and our minds, Manjushri, the Bodhisattva, a great understanding, to whom we bow in gratitude. Working mindfully, working joyfully for the sake of all beings, Samantabhadra, the Bodhisattva of great action, to whom we bow in gratitude. Responding to suffering, serving beings in countless ways, Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of great compassion, to whom we bow in gratitude. Awakening and loving kindness in children, sprouts, and all beings, Maitreya, the Buddha to be born, to whom we bow in gratitude. Showing the way fearlessly and compassionately, the stream of all our ancestral teachers, to whom we bow in gratitude. The Dharma is deep and lovely. We now have a chance to see it and practice it. We vow to realize its true meaning. The Bodhisattva Avalokita, while moving in the deep course of perfect understanding, shed light on the 5 skandhas and found them equally empty. After this penetration, he overcame ill-beingness, and Shariputra formed his emptiness. Emptiness is form. Form is not other than emptiness. Emptiness is not other than form. The same is true with feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. Listen, Shariputra, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They are neither produced nor destroyed, neither defiled nor immaculate, neither increasing nor decreasing. Therefore, in emptiness there is neither form nor feelings, nor perceptions, nor mental formations, nor consciousness, no eye or ear or nose or tongue or body, nor mind, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object
Sangate Paragate Parasangate Holy Swaha. We invoke your name, Avalokiteshvara. We aspire to learn your way of listening in order to help relieve the suffering in the world. You know how to listen in order to understand. We invoke your name in order to practice listening with all our attention and open-heartedness. We will sit and listen without any prejudice. We will sit and listen without judging or reacting. We will sit and listen in order to understand. We will sit and listen so attentively that we will be able to hear what the other person is saying and also what is being left unsaid. We know that just by listening deeply, we already alleviate a great deal of pain and suffering for the other person. We invoke your name, Manjushri. We aspire to learn your way, which is to be still, to look deeply into the heart of things and into the hearts of people. We will look with all our attention and open-heartedness. We will look with unprejudiced eyes. We will look without judging or reacting. We will look deeply so that we will be able to see and understand the roots of suffering through the impermanent and selfless nature of all that is. We will practice your way of using the sword of understanding to cut through the bonds of suffering, thus freeing ourselves and other species. We invoke your name, Samanta Bhadra. We aspire to practice your vow to act with the eyes and heart of compassion, to bring joy to one person in the morning, to ease the pain of one person in the afternoon. We know that the happiness of others is our own happiness, and we aspire to practice joy on the path of service. We know that every word, every look, every action, and every smile can bring happiness to others. We know that if we practice wholeheartedly, we ourselves may become an inexhaustible source of peace and joy for our loved ones and for all species. We invoke your name, Shiti Garba. We aspire to learn your way of being present where there is darkness, suffering, oppression, and despair, so we can bring light, hope, relief, and liberation to those places. We are determined not to forget about or abandon those in desperate situations. We will do our best to establish contact with those who cannot find a way out of their suffering, those whose cries for help, justice, equality, and human rights are not being heard. We know that help can be found in many places on earth. We will do our best not to contribute to creating more hells on earth and to help transform the hells that already exist. We practice this in order to realize the qualities of perseverance and stability, so that like the earth we can always be supportive and faithful to those in need.
I
Take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding. and of love. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community that is in harmony and awareness. In the refuge of Buddha, I see the path of light and beauty in the world. Falling in the refuge of Sangha, I learn to open many doors on the path of transformation. Dwelling in the refuge of Sangha, shining light that supports me, keeping my practice free of obstruction. In the Buddha, in myself, I aspire to help all people recognize their own awakened nature, realizing the mind of love, taking refuge in the Dharma. In myself, I aspire to help all people fully master the ways of practice and walk together on the path of liberation, taking refuge in the Sangha. In myself, I aspire to help all people build fourfold communities to embrace all beings and support their transformation. The sutra, practicing the way of awareness, gives rise to benefits without limit. We vow to share the fruits with all beings. We vow to offer tribute to parents, teachers, friends, and numerous beings who give guidance and support along the path.